Hello, this is Cosmic Heart Conversations with myself, Georgie Dragonfly, and Zach Carlsen, who's now going to share his beautiful story and bring himself into the space. Welcome, Zach.
Hey, Georgie, thanks for having me here.
Mm.
A moment to just introduce myself, is that right?
Yeah.
So I am so grateful to be here. And I'm a healing person. Part of my journey and what a lot of people would call awakening has been to really get clear about my wounds and to find grounded clarity, peace, safety in first having wounds at all. But then a big part of that is I reached a point where in order to really heal any more of my life, for the sake of expansion, for the sake of being able to share more of myself with the world, I needed to actually go out and help other people do the same. And I feel pretty clear that I exist on planet Earth as a human being, but then I'm also aware that there's a multidimensional mystery that has always fascinated me, and that if I'm only focusing on the human dimension, or if I'm only focusing on the spiritual dimension, that I don't have a complete picture of what's actually being asked of me to participate in life. And so at a certain point, I knew that I needed to share what I had been learning with others. And so I do my work here as a coach, a transformational coach. And for me, that's a blend of the very rigorous earthly practices of habits and self-care, living with a vision, a mission, or an intention. And then I blend that with the less concrete, the spiritual, getting in touch with the stories that we tell about ourselves, where those stories came from, the wounds and the shadows that we carry, and how that plays out in our experience. And I think the last thing I'll say about that is that, it's a leadership space, but I lead by walking next to people. I'm not up on a mountaintop saying, I found it, it's this way. Instead, I'm, walking through, I always see it as like a kind of a winter forest, pine trees, we're hearing the same crunch as we walk together. And to me, life is to be collaborated with, not to be overcome or not to be mastered, right? We talk about, self-mastery, and we can't really do that if we have a domination mindset. And so for me, it's all about collaboration.
Wonderful, yeah. And we really are in that space, collaborating. Like we're collaborating right now. Yeah. So where did this all begin for you? Really, when did you start having these realizations, or even prior to that, the first seed of wanting to understand more?
I was a really weird little kid by just classical standards. I I love to be alone. I still do. I require it, actually, and I've had to fight for that in my life. Um, so classically introverted, but then the way that I would think about things felt a little unusual to the adults in my life. Uh, Nothing was ever just on the surface for me. A moment that I remember as like an it moment is I was outside looking up at the sky, and I just thought, if I start traveling upward, I'd go through the clouds, I'd go into outer space. But if I kept traveling up, like, how far could I go? And I remember, I was maybe 7 or 8. I remember this feeling of going like I could travel up forever and just keep going. And that gave me my first taste of the infinite. I was like, if we reach the limit of something, there's something outside of that limit. And what's there? And then if we keep going, something outside of that. And to me, as a child, like, that was a tangible way of talking about mystery, of talking about what is infinite. And then that's kind of been the architecture, the model of my thinking all along. Like, when I'm talking with someone, it's like, you are an infinite being. Like, there isn't enough time available to actually truly experience the richness and the depth of you. And that's everybody. And so then I look at, 8 billion people in the world. It's like 8 billion little universes with an ecosystem of thought and emotion and wonder and pain and shadow and light and like all of this. And I forget that. I'll get annoyed with the person driving in front of me from time to time. But like, kind of my baseline is to acknowledge the mystery, but to not only dwell there, right? Like, I've met people who they've gone so deep into a spiritual path that they don't seem like they're here anymore. And that isn't what I would choose. I say that without judging them, but it certainly is a point of comparison for me, where it's like, I want to be on Earth. Like, I want to have this experience. Have you ever tasted a strawberry? Like, oh my goodness, it's like transcendent. Like, I want to be on Earth. And I want to also keep in mind that I'm not just that there's miracles happening for me and for us at all times. And my part in that is to stay present and acknowledge them, to receive them when they're there, to not push them away. And so that's one version of my story. Another version is that I am a survivor of childhood abuse. And it wasn't my parents. I have amazing parents. But it rattled me to the point that I developed these really elaborate survival strategies. I developed what we generally call OCD and, complex trauma, PTSD, ADHD, like all of these kind of neurodivergent ways of thinking and being. And, in that, before I had any sort of context for it, I felt very alien here. I think naturally I don't think like, I don't think in a standard way. But then you start layering on trauma and survival responses. And I just built on that. It was like it supercharged it. And so on that healing journey that I opened with, what I've needed to learn how to do is to transmute that into something that can actually be offered to this world, instead of something that will just take and ragdoll me around, shake the actual Zach out of me. And that's been a journey.
Yeah, incredible. Because I think through those times, that can send us quite out of body, and having sort of experiences, with the trauma. And then we have to learn how to kind of come back into our physical sense. So it's amazing that you've actually been able to turn around what you've experienced into actually a service, and in order to help others on that path. Amazing. Yeah. So we know that you like to write, and specifically you draw these beautiful mandalas, and I would call them codes, maybe keys to codes. And how would you say that that started for you? Was this something you did when you were younger as a child as well?
The writing, which I don't practice anymore, but it was legitimate, what people call light language. I remember I was on Instagram once and I was scrolling through and I saw it was years ago, but I saw it and I was like, that's that thing that I do. I mean, it wasn't like a version of it. It was the exact script that I had spent years writing, and I was like, that is so bizarre. And then of course I spent some time on Google, and sure enough, lots of people are writing this language that isn't in earthly letters, right? These symbol after, like, just endless symbols, and beautiful to look at, pleasurable to look at. How that started for me is when I was a child. Again, they didn't have ADHD, as a phrase back then. They called me a daydreamer. They weren't sure, should I be in the gifted classes or the special needs classes? And instead of studying for my exams, I would come up with these elaborate ways of cheating on them. That was more interesting to me. Instead of studying math, I would figure out how I could, do well on the exam in my own way. And one of my strategies was, when we were supposed to be writing in our English notebook, I would just pretend to write so that my teacher from her desk would see me and my pen would be moving, and I'd just be doing these scribbles. And I did that for most of my childhood. Whenever I could, instead of doing the thing I was supposed to do, I would find a workaround. And at a certain point, I started looking at it. This was in college, and I was like, there's actual symbols that are repeating here, and that maybe it's muscle memory. And then I went back and it's like, no, these are like repeating over and over again. There's an actual pattern here. There's an organization to them that, again, I'm just like holding my pen and my hand is moving by itself. And I realized there's an order to this, and it's elegant. It's beyond me. Like, I don't know what it is. And then something told me, like, pay attention to what you're thinking about or feeling when you do it. And what I noticed is that it was very trance-like. I wasn't thinking about much of anything. I felt peaceful, safe, and calm. And so for a couple of years, I committed to doing it as a practice. Every day I'd spend 5 minutes, and when the timer would go off, I'd stop. And it was that to me. I had no idea what it was, and I had no idea that other people were doing it either. But then I started taking the symbols. I'd like find a cool one, and then I would take it and I would recreate it in a bigger form so that it like could stand on its own. And I mean, even saying that now, I can feel like a little bit of giddiness in my sternum here. Yeah. I don't know what that means, but I'm aware of a little response there. And, loving to create in the visible realm, worked hard at learning how to technically paint, how to draw. But what really gets me is simplicity. Like, how can we say the most with the least? Minimalism, essentialism, the life that I live in general is minimalist. I'd rather have one really nice thing than 10 kind of nice things in the material realm. Spiritual realm, I'd rather work with one discipline and just go hard at it than to practice a whole bunch of different things at once. And so the mandalas that I co-create in this space are, I think, a blend of all of those kind of ways of being. I kind of close my eyes and I see the first shape, and then I'll put that shape into the app that I created on. It sounds so funny. It's like technology and spirituality are getting so blended together that it like feels like an invitation to go more into it. I think in some spiritual communities I've been a part of, they eschew technology, and I think it really can facilitate some of the channeled works. I couldn't draw freehand as well as I can create those geometric mandalas. But I'll close my eyes, I'll see a shape, and then I'll look at it and I'll see another shape. And it gets built in that collaborative way. And a part of me thinks that's just how all artists work, whether they're aware of it or not. And then another part of me, because like when we look at like Metatron's cube, it looks spiritual. Like I don't know if that's conditioning when we see geometry that looks that way, but I think like on a deeper level, like certain shapes in certain combinations are spiritual. And so when I create those mandalas, it's a little bit of participating in that form, but I also don't fully understand what it is, like with the written language. And so out of respect for the mystery, I have chosen not to do the light language until I kind of get some clarity. I don't know where it would come from, but that it is actually working in the highest good of all of us. And then because I think the geometric mandalas are beautiful to look at, I find pleasure in them. I don't get up in my head about that. And so every once in a while, I'll know it's time to make one, and then I'll honor that call and I'll make one.
Well, I think we always do get that messaging to come in, and that's what can drive us. And a lot of people who I have spoken to that maybe have never even thought of themselves as artists or attempted art are suddenly drawing. And they're like, what's going on? Where is this coming from? And I think because there's a loosening of the loosening of the veil, and then we've obviously got, higher states of consciousness access. And I feel that people are able to tap in to this, maybe knowingly or not knowingly, which enables this flow. And people are doing also that inner child work. Either we're able to hold on to that innate playfulness, and it never quite goes away, or we recall it. And when it's recalled, I feel like there's those expressions, and really we started off as symbols and drawings. If we look back into ancient, tribal communities, everything was symbols and patterns, and it's like we're coming back to that primordial way of receiving information.
Yeah, and I hear in that like archetypal, and maybe that's what I was trying to get my head around a minute ago, is it's like, why is it that when I look at a circle with a ton of interconnected lines, why is it that it feels spiritual to me? And maybe that's another way of saying it feels ancient, it feels primordial, it feels essential, like the essence. If we're alive today listening to this now, like our ancestors survived long enough to give us the genetic material to be here in a body. You know, our consciousness, I don't know, like maybe it comes from other star systems, maybe it comes from other parts of the earth. I mean, I don't know about that, but what I do know is that, you know, if we're listening to this, you know, somebody in our bloodline had to survive long enough, and that would connect us back to like the first person who drew a circle. Like there is somebody in history who drew the first circle. Like how cool is that? And the experience that they would have had, say it was a stick in the dirt, and they look at the stick and they look down in the dirt and they're like, I did that, right? Like that vibration is probably somewhere still active in all of us.
Yeah, definitely. It's still sitting there. And then we can even look back at, you know, if we look on ancient Egypt, where they've got, you know, the flower of life symbols are like printed or, you know, carved into these structures. So it's like, where did that come from? Where did they get that information? You know, we're kind of got a little bit of a copy and paste in that sense, because we're knowing that the symbols have come from these ancient places. But then there's an evolution with that, which I feel is like where it comes into play, that people are starting to play more with the patterns and creating something that, yeah, it feels nice to you. And I guess one would ask, is it because it's something for your soul, or a patterning that is held within your own genetic makeup, and you can be feeling into that frequency?
Yeah. That's it's trippy to think about that. Like if you could bring it down to almost like people have different symbols that are activating for them, that activate creativity, that activate generosity, compassion, and love. And, you know, what if part of our mission was to find out, you know, what is the symbol that is most ancient in us? I love that.
Yeah. So at the moment, what are you doing with your spirituality, of in terms of, because if you're not drawing the codes necessarily right now, or just when you're feeling called, do you feel that there's a practice that's taking the center stage at the moment?
The first thing that comes to mind is more of this, having heart-centered conversations with other beings, human beings. There was a season in my life when I was, and I'm so grateful for it, but I was like super far out, and, you know, asking for interdimensional contact and asking for, you know, mystical experiences. And my relationships suffered, my human relationships suffered. And I didn't see it at the time, but I was kind of checked out. And, you know, it's back to part of my commitment is like finding how we can do both, right? Have a really rich inner experience that no one else has to understand or agree with, but then to also participate in this dramatic, like, I mean, I'm looking outside and it's like, it's a typical day, but there's like so much to look at. Like, I don't want to disconnect from that. Like, looking at a leaf, it's like I could spend all day looking at a leaf and still not see it. Like, I'm coming back to that, right? Coming back to a real reverence for earth and for nature. And so part of my practice is to really honor the conversation that I'm in, and to be fully here with you. Like, you're the only person in my universe right now, except for the squirrel that keeps distracting me because he's playing, right? The squirrel is playing. And that's the other part, is learning how to play. Like, I'm wired for the shadow. Like, I can own that. I have had seasons where I've gone really, I think, recklessly into my shadow. I've gone arrogantly into my shadow and had my ass handed back to me. And so like learning how to play more as well and enjoy life and being of service. And then the actual practices for me are less meditation and more reflection and contemplation. Sitting in a window seat and just looking out the window without an objective. I have this strong masculine energy in me where it's like, even when I'm meditating, it's like, I'm going to meditate for 20 minutes. And if I do this every day for the next 15 years, I'll have a spiritual awakening. Like even when I'm like actively not trying to have a goal, like I have a goal when I meditate. When I contemplate, when I reflect, when I give my eyes something to just look at and track, right? An ant walking around, I actually get the benefits of meditation that, the internet talks about. I feel calmer, I feel more capable, I feel more generous, I feel present. And so that's one practice that I went to reluctantly, because it doesn't sound as sexy and cool as like I meditate for 20 minutes a day, 3 hours a day. I stare out a window for 20 minutes a day, but that's part of the path too, is like really using what works, even if it's absurd. And then not living in like the shoulds or the rules of like some spiritual practice that definitely works for other people, but might not work for us. It's vulnerable.
Yeah, because we're always trying to find a route, and yeah, I've been there. If I do this, this, and this, it will lead me to this path. And I've been finding recently everything that I was doing just broke down. I just couldn't even bring myself to do it. And I thought, what is going on? Why is my structure just disintegrated? I love all these things, surely, but it was about finding that, okay, I can be that without those things as well. There is other routes.
Yeah.
With that presence within this physical reality, so important. So important. Do you find that you have any connection with nature into your spiritual practice? I mean, going out, being there, like I really feel like the energies and the presence of trees.
Yeah. Oh, I love this question, Georgie, because it makes me actually acknowledge it. And for me, it's the ground. When I was a kid, they called me the thing finder, because I was always walking like with my eyes toward the ground, and I would find these little rusted bits of metal, to-do lists. I had a big shoebox full of other people's grocery list, to-do list, outside the grocery store. Someone throws it on the ground, it blows out of the trash can, and they were little treasures for me. Milk, eggs, tampons, like it's like, oh, like this is somebody else's life written on a list, and they don't know that I have it. It was magical to me. And so, looking down to me is a spiritual practice of connecting with nature, looking at where my feet literally are. I was with a group of men in the mountains, and we spent a half an hour just like kind of scattered around, and we're just going to observe for 30 minutes. And there's this beautiful mountain range. I mean, like a beer commercial, right? Quality, just snow on the top of them, these clouds that were moving, the sun was perfect. And where my attention was drawn was to this rock in front of me and these other little rocks around it. And I spent the 30 minutes like looking there, like I couldn't help myself. I wanted to be like, oh, like I'm so inspired by this mountain. And it's like, no, for whatever reason, I was inspired by these little crumble of rocks in front of me. They're fascinating. Nothing was moving. There was no, butterfly on it. It was like honoring that part of me that's interested in what's small and right in front of me, as opposed to this what vistas. I think I was embarrassed of that for a long time, but to own it has really given me access to it, because wherever I go, like there I am, like there will be a little crumble of rocks pretty much anywhere I go. Endlessly, I have an endless invitation to be fascinated.
That's really interesting, because it just kind of brings you in to this. I suppose it's almost like, yeah, when if you see an ant, it's like, how often do people really see ants? Unless it's like big piles of them. But if you was to be that mindful and contemplating just by looking at the ground, you might just see a little ant passing by, or
Yes.
a pile of rocks.
And there's actually a practice that I have shared with my clients, the people I support, of you take a half an hour and you go and you kneel over like a foot of grass, and you notice what you notice. And at first you just notice a bunch of grass blades, and then you notice like there's actually other types of plants in there, these little things that look like grass but they're not. Then you notice, oh, there's insects everywhere. Did they just appear, or were they there the whole time and I didn't notice? Spend 30 minutes looking at like a square foot of grass, and suddenly, like for me, it's like that infinite feeling again. It's like, oh my gosh, like space is infinite, and then this foot of grass is infinite. It's really wonderful, and it can be really grounding too, because we're close to the earth physically.
Yeah, definitely. Because it's quite interesting to think, is that micro macro concept of how, yes, we think, oh, infinite, and then you think about space, but actually there's that really honed in right here. I mean, that ant, I mean, if they looked up and saw you, like, whoa, there's a lot out there. But bringing it back in, and you can really feel into their energy, and gifts that they have as well. Each has each little being is its own teacher as well for us. So have you gone through some quite expansive experiences then in your time? Because you said earlier, I'm just going to go back over something, that there was something you said about, you felt that you lost people in this time that you really expanded out. And I just wanted to, if you don't mind, touching on that a little bit more of what that's like and how you came back into that.
Yeah. I mean, for me, there's a thing that I think happens anytime we do any kind of intentional personal development work. A lot of times it's the result of a relationship ending, and it's like, someone will really dive into, what their life, or somebody passes away, or someone has a spontaneous revelation, and then they start doing this work intentionally. And what happened to me is that I turned that into judgment for a season. I was living with more intention. I was, getting my finances straight. I was connecting with my spiritual self. And then I would look at other people and I'd think, they're not doing that. And, for this season of life, I was judging them. And it didn't feel good at all. And yet it was my reflex. It was like I'm better than them scenario. And it doesn't feel good to say that but it's true. And I've talked with enough people to know too, the people who actually helped me out of it said that, be aware of that, because that's not the point, dude, of any of this work. It's to actually give more of ourselves to other people. The more that we can know about ourselves, our nature, our connection to spirit, our connection to the earth, the more that we can bring through us energetically and actually give and receive. Like, receiving is tough work for some of us. And so, yeah, that initial season, and for me, it was when I got sober. I had spent about 10 years just running wild, and I hit rock bottom. It was life or death for me, and I got sober. And part of getting sober was to develop my spirituality, and that was who I was judging, right? Is people who were still out there doing drugs, and I would want to say to them, like, there's a better way. This is so amazing. Like I can say that I have been sober and higher than I ever was on drugs. Like, you could have never told me that before, because I did every drug in the book, and I've been as high, I think, as a person possibly can. I was kind of actively trying to die, but through this self-work, through getting in touch with my body, through being of service to other people, that has released more dopamine than any drug that you could get anywhere, even on the internet. Like, that to me is interrelated to the judgment piece. And so that was one season. Another season was where I only wanted to be around spiritual people. I was really into the starseed community, and I did the same thing. Like, I judged people that I didn't think were on a spiritual path, and that's like the opposite of the point, right? If there are starseeds here and the mission is to expand the consciousness of this planet and to evolve the frequency of the earth through the vessel of the human form, judging other people who don't know that lingo, like, that's not going to do it. That's not the mission, right? And so, again, it was like it was a season in my life that I was all in on, and I was clumsy at it. And so I needed to, that's the shadow for me, right? My judgment of other people, my arrogance, right? In the face of, what has been freely given to me by the generosity and love of others, the earth and the universe. And so instead of using that to judge others, it's to use it to figure out how I can serve this person. And sometimes serving people means getting away from them, right? Not enabling them, or giving them some sort of a counterpoint, right? But that was 10 years ago. The path now is to live by example. Like, no one could have told me about a spiritual path, right? I learned that by seeing other people and being like, how do they do that? Like how did they do that? Like, I had to come to it naturally and get curious. No one was going to come and preach to me about any of this stuff, which is one of the things I respect about you, Georgie, and this conversation we're having, is that you create space to model, one guy in Minnesota's spiritual life, and then all the other people that you'll have on the show. So I just want to honor you in that. I see it really clearly, and right now I'm feeling it. So thank you.
Thank you for giving space for that. Because I think we've all moved through that for sure. I've been there too. I also vegan advocate as well. I've gone through that phase of thinking that that's the only way, and then just being outrightly annoyed with everyone that doesn't have the level of compassion that I had or have. But I just let it and know where everyone's on their unique journey, finding their way. And yes, we have to really work through that stuff. And I guess we all have judgment. Everyone comes with it, whatever category it comes into. We'll find it somewhere, and it's only something that's really within ourselves. And when we find that, you find those gifts. And again, and that's where the service work comes in, because it allows that space to go, oh, like I can actually help people with this when I accept them. Seeing them as whole, seeing them as like just equally as divine as me, but just on a different path. And then it allows them to come forward for that help as well, rather than pushing it and trying to change people and things. And yes, there is a definite shift, I think, even in the starseed community, because we've been always trying to follow and be in communities. And I think that sometimes we get trapped into, because we want to be in a community and we like some of those parts of a community, then we take on the whole. And I guess it's really good, it's really healthy to go in there, but then you've got to pick apart what's yours and what's others, or just not in service for you as an individual. Yeah,
Love
around that
that.
space. Yeah, it's brilliant. And on that note, I wonder if you have some form of like a transmission or something that you could share for people to feel that energy and that essence of what we've been talking about today.
Mm.
Mm.
I mean, I think it's about coming back into the body. And there's a practice that I do with the people I serve as a coach, to really drop into the body, because most of the spiritual experiences I've had have been received by the body, right? In some way. Like the spiritual component, that's a mystery. Like I don't know, but it's like the chills that we get, right? I can't get chills if I don't have a body, right? The intuitive whispers that we sometimes actually seem to hear with our eardrums, like I can't have that if I don't have eardrums, right? Finding safety in the body first seems to enhance our capacity to receive more of those transmissions. And so the exercise that I do with my clients, I could do it here. It takes about 5 minutes. Yeah, cool. So anyone who's listening, I just invite you to give yourself permission for 5 minutes to be here now. And if you're in a place, to just gently sit down. And we'll start by noticing the fact that we have a body, and that our body occupies space, and that where we are physically, nothing else can be. And to acknowledge that the body has an interior and an exterior, an outside and an inside. The body has an inner experience and an outer experience. In that simple way, we can acknowledge that we're physically multidimensional. Making room then to acknowledge all the sensations of the body. Bringing our awareness to the toes, creating a mental image of the toes, creating a mental image of each foot, feeling the mind along the bottom of each foot and finding the ankle, creating a mental sensation of the ankle, moving up the leg, calf muscle and shin bone to the knee, finding the knee, finding the symbolism of the knee, that the knee bends and makes so much possible, running, jumping, dancing, but it only bends in one way, a symbol not to force things. As we continue to create a mental image of the thighs, front, sides, and back, and finding the mind at the hips, noticing that the hip bones create a shape of a nest, and acknowledging that inside of that nest is an energy center. For many, it's a symbol of home, safety, and security. And for some, it's a bundle of nerve ganglia, an acknowledgement that these spiritual centers have a physical home in the body, each chakra corresponding with bundles of nerve ganglia, receptors capable of receiving and giving transmissions of energy or data. And setting the intention in this energy center to release anything that's not ours to hold. Moving up into the belly, finding another center, another consolidation of nerves, finding the seat of our intuition. And again, releasing anything that is not ours to hold or work with, clear, cleanse, or align. We move up a little bit to the solar plexus, the inner sun, solar plexus, finding the seat of our identity, the space that answers when we ask, who am I? Giving ourselves permission now to hear, to listen, to honor, and to act from that place. Giving ourselves permission to be misunderstood in service of understanding and honoring ourselves. Now moving up into the heart space, sacred chamber, acknowledging that the heart by its nature opens and closes. A heart that is only open does not beat. A heart that is only closed does not beat. Acknowledging with generosity that the heart in its nature opens and closes physically. And moving up into the throat, sacred point of alchemy in the body, where we take the electricity of the mind, transmute it into vibration when we speak, changing one form, electricity, into another, vibration with our voice. Giving ourselves permission to acknowledge that our voice matters, that the words we speak matter and can have an impact. Moving up into the brain, imagining a light brightening in the skull, illuminating, and everywhere that light touches, it releases us from the need to manage our thoughts. Knowing that the mind by nature, the brain physically constructed to create thought after thought after thought after thought after thought. The way a tree creates leaves by its nature. And looking to trees, each leaf has a season with the tree. And when that season is over, it falls. It becomes the earth that then nourishes the roots of that tree. May we find that capacity in our thinking to allow the mind and the brain to do its work by its nature, but to not cling to the thoughts the way a tree does not cling to its leaves. And finally, we find ourselves at the crown of our head. We can imagine the gentle weight of a crown, a symbol of our divinity, our right to be here now. Taking a moment to acknowledge all that we've experienced here. Returning to the body through the breath, noticing the breath. Wiggling the toes and fingertips, returning to the room. And when you're ready, gently open your eyes.
Thank you so much, Zach. That was amazing. Just interesting as well. As you said, open your eyes. I got this like tap jolt energy. I was like, oh. Like I had to kind of open my eyes anyways. Like it's quite interesting. It's like you gotta come back onto the podcast and speak. Okay. Yeah, that was really interesting. People can go back into that and observe if, and actually as well, if you have trouble, thinking that you can't see, if you was able to see your foot and your leg, and then you've got vision. Must say
I
that.
love that. Yeah. And that inner eye, which is literally an eye, it's got rods and cones, it's light reactive, like it's deep inside the brain, physical brain. And I think practicing that, it strengthens the eye too. It doesn't even need to be a spiritual practice. Just close your eyes and try to recreate the room that you're in with your mind. It's like a workout for that eye. It's probably been a while for most people.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's a really good exercise. So thank you for that. It's really helpful. And when people would like to find and book in with you, where would they be able to find you? And what
The
offerings?
best place to stop would be Instagram. I've got all my links there. My handle is Strengths Life, STRENGHSLIFE. There, it's a place where I try to offer as many free resources as I possibly can. I create a lot of content there. And then if people want to visit my website, I do one-on-one coaching. It's a vibe similar to the work that we did here together collaboratively. And that website is Zach Carlsen, and Carlsen with an SEN.com. But really, if people are listening and they want to do something, pay it forward. Share Georgie's work with as many people as you can. If you had an insight here, share the insight with other people. Not necessarily my name, but share that energy that you got. If you feel more loving, more open, more connected, go out and give that to somebody. That's really the biggest gift that I think I could receive for my time being here today.
Oh, thank you. That was amazing. Oh, yeah. So do reach out to either of us in the comments, or even personally on the Instagram. And all of the actual links will be on this podcast as well, so you can just find them in the description. Okay. So thank you everybody for today. Thank you, Zach, for your humble energy. And it's been an absolute blessing. And we'll see you all at the next podcast. Loads of love.